Mr. Drury.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I won't be long in my introduction. This covering paper merely reflects a paper put up by HBRC. I mean, there is a delay to financial close. We all realise that, and delays do carry costs. And the supporting paper that HBRC have put forward have set down what those costs are with a recommendation of how they see that being funded. So I think I should hand over to them for the explanations.
Could we let Dave Roberts go? I think he might still be on the phone.
Okay, I'll drop off.
Yeah, cheers, Dave. Go and watch your cricket, Dave.
Thanks very much, Dave. Do you want to hang up there?
Yeah, he's hung up.
So, Chairman, thanks for your introduction, Mr. Drury.
Oh, sure. Thanks.
No one's more irritated than we, probably, that we should be having to come and ask you for an increase in the budget. But there, as the paper sets out, there are delays, there are cost consequences of earlier delays and processes, and we are not going to be able to reach financial close within the current budget. As the paper says, we are seeking funding also for some early works which are required, and we have traversed this with you before, earlier this year, about commencing early geotechnical work, so some drilling that has to be undertaken in order to finalise the dam design. That does have to be undertaken at a certain time of the year so that we can stay on the critical path. So we're regretful of the fact that we have to come and ask you for approval for a small increase in the budget, and I'm going to hand over to Andrew to just step through, and then we'll take questions.
Thanks, Chairman. Look, it's probably as easy as anything to take questions, but obviously extra time results never in extra cost, and that extra time is at least in part and significantly driven by a judicial review process that's outside of our control, and at this point in time we don't know whether that will be heard in December or late January, February. So that's a moving bit, which is just something we have to wear. The other point I'd make in cost issues is that DOC did decide to run an incredibly rigorous process of assessment around this land exchange at effectively our collective expense. So that's a major driver. What that does is it just triggers into critical path issues, and we note the geotech work. So what the constructor has requested is that they undertake a modest amount of the early geotechnical work to get themselves in the critical path process for delivery of water in the 1920 irrigation season, and that's been honed back to what is the minimal position. In addition to that, there's some modest expense around internal staff. We're cutting back the sales process with a view to gearing that up immediately prior to financial close. So it's fair to say that the board has gone through this with a fine-tooth comb, and pretty much Graham sort of hacked our position to bits. Haven't you really? Sorry, directors. Tough job. And look, the final point I'd simply make is that in a positive sense, some of the confusion that was sat between Crown Irrigation Investments and the IAF, the Irrigation Acceleration Fund, 12 months ago has been resolved, and a reasonably significant proportion of this work does qualify for IAF funding. So we're reasonably well advanced on that, actually, in terms of that tranche of cash to keep going. So the bottom line is the position for HBRC, that HBRC's requesting from HBRC is to simply move its borrowing facility from 2 million to 2.5 million. That's the guts of it. So happy to just take questions.
So I note the leverage on the balance sheet doesn't shift very far. That's a revaluation, is it?
Yeah, well, it's a revaluation of the balance sheet, obviously.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
When would you draw it down? It's probably staring me in the face here, but I mean, when is the requirement, or it's any time from now on, sort of thing?
Late January, Heath. Yep.
Late January. Okay.
Yep.
Excuse me. Questions, Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to HBRC, and that's regard to their costs with the judicial review process. Clearly, this is outside their control, and they're parties to a process between DOC and Forest and Bird. Will you be going costs in the possible outcome that it's fines in favour of DOC? And whatever the outcome, who actually fronts the costs on this one should the court award costs?
Well, there are two sorry, there's several questions there. There are two respondents. So Forest and Bird's brought the case. There are two respondents. The first respondent is DOC, and we're named as the second respondent. The second point is that if yes, we will be going for costs. And if the case is heard effectively, when I say our, I've really got to say, firstly, the primary respondents' favour, with us as the secondary. So how those costs might be dispersed, whichever way the case goes, we'll just have to wait and see.
Oh, no, sorry, I thought Councillor Graham had his hand up. Councillor Belford.
Given the minuscule impact on the balance sheet, did you give any consideration to asking for the 922 of us in the event that you're unsuccessful with MPI, and to save yourselves having to come back another time and ask us for 922?
I think the first part of our answer to that question is we think that the Regional Council has ponied up more than its fair share of the cost of this already, and if there's funds available from the Crown for this sort of work, then we should ask for that. We have cash available still, but we don't have enough cash available to get us to the end. It looks like we're getting 2 for 1 from the Crown, but we aren't. We have to put up 50% of the total cost that they provide. So some of it is out of the increase, and some of it is out of the cash that we currently have.
The 700,000 that relates to geotechnical work, would that work, or could that work have any bearing on the final cost of the construction part of this? I mean,
through you, remember when we came to you in February, I think, talking about $2 million of early geotech work? Well, this is part of that. This is part of that work, and the contractors have agreed just to do six holes at $700,000, and the second part of the geotech work, which is another 1.15 million. Heath, have I got the numbers right? Is deferred until, in fact, hopefully until we have financial close. So there was $2 million that we asked for originally. We haven't approved the $2 million. The $700,000 is part of the overall contractual price. And the interesting thing about it is whether or not if we do get financial close, whether we actually have to pay that $700,000 to the contractor anyway, because it'll be part of because of the ongoing progress payments under the contract.
so just to clarify, I'm a little confused. If with this with this geotechnical work, the $700,000 or whatever amount of work you're still contemplating of this nature, would it be undertaken only if financial close was reached?
No.
It
has
to go ahead.
It has to proceed before that, unless financial close were to happen in January or something like that, which is not going to happen. So, so the timing of things, it's most unlikely. If we could get to financial close and we didn't have to spend this money before financial close, then of course we would do that. But we think that is very unlikely. And in order to stay on the critical path, we have to do this work starting in the new year. We can't shift it later, even if financial close is a bit later.
Graham wants to make.
Well, but if you do not achieve financial close, the work is irrelevant, isn't it?
No. No, because, well, if we didn't achieve financial close and that was a permanent state for the scheme, that would be correct. But if we didn't achieve financial close, and theoretically financial close happened 2 or 3 or 4 years out, any geotech and design work has got value.
Councillor Hewitt, then Councillor Graham.
Thank you. I have 2 questions. Just to clarify, the delay in financial close that's been caused by Forest and Bird, you've got 2 figures here, the financial cost, one of legal fees of $85,000 and one of additional operational expenses, $364. So it's the combination of those 2 figures that they have cost this project. Or is the 364 the total? Does it include the 85?
Oh, sorry, Heath or Graham, can you be a bit more specific about that? Cool.
The 85,000 is specifically related to our legal costs associated with the judicial review, so that stands alone as a line item associated with that activity. The 364 is our ongoing operational costs as a result of the knock-on delays and not meeting financial close in December 2015. So you add them together.
Quite significant. Okay, thank you. My second question, and this is for our Chief Executive, 432,000 the HBRC board is asking for. Why are we not considering, we've got a lot of cash and it's sitting around with very small interest bearing capacity at the moment, so has the discussion been had as to whether we consider another alternative to funding this shortfall?
Yeah, you're quite right, Councillor. It's just a preference that HBRC's put forward in the same way as the $2 million was put forward in March. They see borrowing it in short term at a fairly low interest rate, to be fair, as one way of funding this instead of requiring additional payments in cash from council. But at the end of the day, it'll all be part of the 80 million. So it is a bit moving the money around, but I mean, I respect HBRC's decision to fund independently, but at the end of the day it will all come back as part of the same investment.
Councillor Graham.
My question is to you, Jim. You seem to be fielding these ones. Understand the seasonal imperatives, but because the 700 grand is in fact part offset in the contract, isn't it then by definition part of financial close condition precedent? So you have a seasonal imperative, but in fact you're going beyond.
I mean, effectively we're no different than the position we were in last February when we said we couldn't do this because it was $2 million worth of work and we didn't want to do the work because financial close was being delayed. What we're now being told is with a September 19 closure date of the D&C contract, unless we spend the $700,000 in January and February of 2016, that date will be gone. And so what we're saying is we have to take a risk on the $700,000 of expense if we are to meet the September 2019 closure. So it's quite straightforward, really. We can't delay this. I mean, that's why financial close was looking to be December. This work would have been done in January and February. We've now got a delay. So the potential downturn of this is that we will be looking at losing another construction season, and you can imagine the effect of that.
Yeah. But by definition, it is going beyond the condition precedent.
Yes.
Councillor Bevan.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This was touched on before, but I didn't really hear a resolution. What happens if MPI say no?
We will probably have to come back to you, or we will have to think about how else we do this. We've had indications, but you know, indications are indications, not decisions, that that this is likely to be supported. We could have waited and not brought you this paper and not brought you this proposition until we knew the answer. But we thought, we know we're in this position, so we should bring it to you now, not knowing what the answer to that is. Between a rock and a hard place on a couple of dimensions of this, we've decided to be open.
So you probably wouldn't object if somebody altered this recommendation to include another $900,000 so that you have the capacity to cover that if MPI say no, because that would save you having to come back here and have another debate with us.
I'd prefer you don't.
Is there any more money you'd like to give back?
Okay. Any further questions?
Even a conditional version of that decision would be unhelpful in the process that we're currently in. But thank you for the thought.
So, any further questions? Someone happy to take us to that recommendation? Then Councillor Bevan, it seemed you were well across that, it looked to me. But anyone happy to move recommendations 1 through 4? Councillor Dick, thank you. And we have someone to second that. You'll second that. Thank you, Councillor Scott. You wish to speak, Councillor Dick? Councillor Scott.
Mr Chairman, considering the appetite, I'm sure I'm surprised everyone wasn't jumping to move it. So.
Okay. Further discussion. Councillor Graham.
It's well known that I don't support this dam. It's quite difficult because I sit through all these things and I just think this is a nightmare of an investment. So I just don't want to be seen that I'm voting against everything for the sake of it. I'm voting against everything because I really sincerely believe this is a poor investment from the council, poor investment for our region, and therefore I have to vote against everything associated with it.
Councillor Bevan.
We're doing a reversal here because I'm actually going to support this motion. And the reason why is simply because we have got pretty close now to financial close, and to deprive HBRC of the opportunity to do this work and run the risk that the dam gets delayed another 12 months has severe financial implications. And although I'm pretty unhappy about a commitment of another $700,000, that might be down a hole. Well, it is down a hole, bunch of holes. The consequences of not doing this are significant, and I think I don't have any choice but to support it.
Other comments? Put the motion up. You wish to sum up?
I've got to have a reply, I think. Whilst we haven't reached final decision points yet, I actually believe that this is, if everything pans out, if we can tick the rest of the boxes, this will be a magnificent investment for this region and a magnificent investment for the Regional Council and its equity partners. The simple reason that if you establish a utility business that, albeit may have high fixed costs, it has low ongoing costs, and if at the outset you have pre-sold your product to the point where you are cash flow positive, then it will be a real money coiner for the region, for the other investors, with wonderful flow-on benefits, and in fact it will be a far less risky business to own than a commercial port.
Thank you. I'll put that motion. And all those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, no. Division again, righto, in favour. Yeah, right. And against. And Mr. Moore, he abstains. So. Right. Thank you, gentlemen. We have some other business to deal with the rest of the day. Are you able to stick around for a little while, Dr.
You
30 minutes?
You can't do it, Mr. Chairman.
What's that?
You can't go into committee.
There's another public.
No, there's
sorry.
public excluded paper, Councillor Dick, and I've heard what you've said, so I've got a solution which will both please and surprise you. There you go. You do, yes.
I shall return.
Thank you. Yeah.
I don't take orders.
Times 9.
We
Yeah.